It is the 28th of October in the year 1707. The hour is just before 2 in the afternoon. Over the inland sea, the light is thin and gold. In Osaka, the boats slide along the canals on time, poled slow and steady. In the warehouses by the water, merchants count sacks of rice against the ledger. In Kyoto, the temple bells keep the afternoon. Women carry bundles of cloth home along the river road. An old man dozes in the shade of a wooden gate. Down in Tosa, on the far southern coast, the fishermen are mending nets on the shingle. The tide is low and kind. A few children wander the wet sand where the sea has drawn back a little, the way it always does. In Nagoya, the dyers hang long banners of cloth to dry. On the Tokaido road, the pack horses climb toward the mountain pass, small bells ringing at their necks. In Nara, the fields lie flat and still under a warm sky. Everything moves the way it has always moved. The boats are on time. The roads are busy. Nothing in the air says otherwise. And yet, it is already decided. Far below the sea, along a seam in the floor of the world, something held for lifetimes is about to come free. It is already moving. It has already chosen. It is already on its way. None of them look up. None of them stop. None of them know. Across the whole southern coast of Japan, in this one warm hour, millions of people are living the last ordinary minutes of their lives. If you want to walk these last hours beside them, stay with this channel and leave your mark on it, so the next reconstruction reaches you in time. For 200 years and more, the two great plates beneath this coast had leaned against each other and refused to move. The land pressed down. The sea floor bent and held. The strain gathered the way it gathers in a bent branch, slow, silent, patient. And then, in less than a single minute, 2 centuries of that strain came free at once. It was like a green branch, bent a little further every year for 200 years, then let go in one breath. That is what the earth did that afternoon, out under the sea. Before we go on, 3 questions. Why was this disaster so complete? Why did so many people never see it coming? And what human choice turned a wave into a catastrophe? Hold on to one idea as we walk. This was not only the sea. This was the sea, and the things people had decided long before it ever came. This coast had drowned before. 200 years earlier, in 1498, the water had risen along these same shores and swallowed whole towns. Thousands died. A busy port on the Hamana water was wiped from the map and never returned. 100 years after that, in 1605, the sea came again in the dark of evening. Again, it took thousands. The old people still knew these stories. Their own grandparents had buried the drowned, so the villages had learned. They raised long banks of earth against the water. They set stones on the high ground and cut warnings into them for children not yet born. They built, and they felt safe, and slowly, safety turned into forgetting. Because the banks were low, because the stones were old, because the last great wave had come and gone before anyone now living was born. The line the sea would one day cross had been written down plainly. For lifetimes, no one read it. Come back now to that afternoon and stay a while longer. This time, move slowly from town to town and look at the faces. In the fishing town of Kure, the men are dragging nets up the shingle, calling to each other across the boats. In Tanizaki, the women spread the day's catch to dry in the low sun. Along the Muroto shore, barefoot boys race across the flats, daring the tide to catch them. In a hillside village, a grandmother sits weaving in her doorway. 2 streets down, a midwife hurries between houses. By the harbor, a young father lifts his daughter onto his shoulders to show her the boats. In Nagoya, a merchant counts coins into a trader's palm. On the Tokaido, another leads his tired horses toward the inn he can already picture. In Osaka, an old woman carries her grandson down to the canal to watch the water traffic go by. It is warm. It is ordinary. It is the kind of afternoon no one remembers afterward because nothing had happened in it yet. Nobody is watching the sea. Nobody is walking the old path up to the high ground. Nobody is thinking of the worn stones on the hill. And that is exactly why, when it comes, no one will be ready. It is coming now, in a little under 1 minute. It is 1:45 in the afternoon. The ground moves. Not a shudder, not a jolt. A deep, rolling heave, as if the whole island had been cut loose and set adrift on open water. The sound comes up from underneath. A low groan in the earth, then a roar, then the crack and grind of timber and stone. It does not stop. It runs on far past the point where the body expects it to end. People grab for walls that are already leaning. The floor tilts and will not hold still. To stand is to be thrown down. To reach for a child is to fall. This is the largest earthquake this country will know for 300 years. It tears the sea floor open along a line as long as a full day's journey by ship. The whole southern coast splitting at once, in one motion from one end to the other. The land itself is changed for good. Far out on Cape Moroto, the coast lifts higher than a tall man can reach, and stays there, raised out of the water, for centuries. And when the shaking finally eases, and the dust hangs in the still, ringing air, the worst of it has not even begun. Out at sea, the water has already answered. The quake has heaved the ocean floor upward, and the ocean has risen with it, and now that risen water is moving. In the deep, it is almost nothing to see. A long, low swell, barely a ripple under a passing hull. A fisherman a little way out feels only a strange, gentle lift beneath his boat, and thinks nothing of it at all. But it is crossing the water as fast as a passenger jet. It is racing the last miles to shore in the time it takes to boil a pot of rice. On the beaches, people are only just steadying themselves, brushing off the dust, calling out their children's names. They have minutes. They do not know they have minutes. The clock is already running, and only the sea can hear it. And then the water does the strangest thing of all. It leaves. Along the shore, the sea pulls back, far, and then farther than anyone has ever watched it go. The tide runs out in minutes, not hours. Boats settle sideways into the mud. Fish flap on bare rock where the water has always been. It looks like a gift. People walk out onto the wet ground to gather the fish by hand. Children chase after them, laughing, out across the open seabed. A few old men stand still and uneasy, staring at a shoreline that has never once looked like this. Some feel it low in the stomach, that this is wrong, that the sea does not leave without a reason. But most see only the fish, and the strange new ground, and the story they will tell at supper. No one understands that the sea has drawn back its arm to strike. In one village on the Tosa coast, an old headman does understand. He had heard it long ago from his grandfather, that when the ground roars and the sea runs away, you do not chase the fish. You run. He gathers nothing. He turns his back on the water, and he shouts. He drives his neighbors up the hill path, pushing the slow ones ahead, a small child clinging to his back, counting heads out loud as he climbs. By the time the sea comes back for them, they are already above it. He saves everyone who ran when he ran. For almost everyone else along that coast, there was no grandfather's voice, and there were no minutes to spare. It does not come as a wall. That is the picture in the mind, and the picture is wrong. It comes as a flood, with no floor to it. A black, churning ridge of water, dragging the wreck of everything it has already taken. Timber, boats, roofs, mud. It is not clean. It is not blue. It is the color of the drowned earth. The roar reaches the shore before the water does. Then, the water. It climbs the beach at Hōei to the height of an 8-story house and does not slow. It folds the whole town under in seconds. Along the rest of the Tosa shore, it rises higher than a 2-story house, again and again, village after village. Tanizaki goes under. The low streets of the fishing towns go under. Places that still had names that morning have no streets left by dark. There is no one to film it. There is no wire to carry the news outward. What we know because a few survivors and temple clerks wrote it down later by lamplight. The water, the darkness, the sound, and afterward, the silence. In another town, a young man stays at the shrine on the rise, ringing the bell. It is the only warning the village has. A heavy bell, swung by hand, telling every soul below to climb. He does not run while the bell can still be heard. He rings it as the water swallows the lower streets. He rings it as the water climbs toward him, calling the last stragglers up the slope. The bell stops when the sea reaches the shrine. He is never found. He bought other people their minutes with his own. And here is the thing that turns the whole story cold. There was time. The earth gave its warning first, loud and long, minutes before the water. The sea gave its warning too, running out across the sand for all to see. The signal was there. It had always been there. It was cut into the stones on the hills, written into the old chronicles, and carried in the grandfather's voice by the fire. The warning was never missing. It had only been forgotten. Lifetimes of calm had quietly taught these people that the sea stays where it is, that the earthen banks are enough, that the last great wave was surely the largest there would ever be. And so thousands stood on the sand and read the signs exactly backward, not because the signs were silent, but because no one had kept the memory alive to read them by. That is the cruelty of it. The knowledge that would have saved them had been theirs once, freely. They had simply let it slip away. Now count the cost. More than 5,000 people are gone. A whole small town's worth of the living, erased between one afternoon and the next. Homes fall by the tens of thousands, close to 30,000 of them. A city's worth of houses turn to splinters and mud in an hour. Coastlines are redrawn. Farmland in the Nara Basin sinks as the shaking turns solid ground to liquid beneath it. And far inland, in Shizuoka, an entire mountainside tears loose and slides down, one of the greatest landslides this country has ever seen, burying an area the size of 200 football fields under enough earth and rock to swallow a town whole. The warning had been standing in plain sight the entire time. Stones sat on the hillsides with old words cut into them. Do not build your home below this line. Reports gathered dust in the records. Elders had told the stories for years. All of it was there. All of it had been walked past for 100 years. Afterward, things did change. The rulers sent out their orders to rebuild. People raised the banks higher and set down fresh stones with new dates carved into them. And the earth was still not finished with that year. 7 weeks later, Mount Fuji itself woke and burned for the first time in centuries, dusting the distant capital in gray ash, as if to sign its name at the bottom of the page. The coast learned, once again, what it had known and forgotten before. And it would forget again, and be taught again, in the long centuries still to come. But the 5,000 saw none of it. They never saw the higher banks, or the new stones, or the mountain burning in the winter sky. For them, the whole story ended on a warm afternoon in October, at 1:45, in the moment the ground began to move, and the sea went quiet. If there is a disaster you want us to reconstruct next, Tell us in the comments below, and we will walk into it together.